Hello, everybody. Welcome to Early Chicago History. This is a program from the Raupp Museum. My name is Debbie Fondre. I'm the museum curator, and I'm the one who will be talking to you today. So let's get started. This first map is from 1717. Chicago was on the map 300 years ago. It's the blue star up in the top right-hand corner. That's before the United States had even become a country. Who do you think lived in Chicago 300 years ago? Why did they choose to live in that location? Is there anything else you recognize on the map? Can you spot the Mississippi River? By 1784, there were more buildings in Chicago. The earliest people in Chicago were Native Americans, Potawatomi, fur trappers, explorers, and traders who bought the furs. One reason they chose Chicago was because it was easy to get to by land and by water. What forms of transportation do you see in the picture? Can you see the canoe? What other ways do you think they had to get around if they were traveling by land instead of by water? After the fur trading post, the next people to come to Chicago were the Army. They built Fort Dearborn to protect the land, but also to protect the water. Chicago was still very small at this time. There were only 12 houses in the whole town. In 1818, Illinois becomes a state. But Chicago almost gets left out. Look at the map on the left-hand side. This was the first map from when Illinois wanted to become a state. Can you see what's missing? Look up at the top. There's no Lake Michigan, and if there's no Lake Michigan, there's no Chicago. Was Chicago important yet, if it almost got left out of Illinois becoming a state? Luckily, that didn't happen. The map on the right-hand side is the one we used when we actually did become a state. And you can see that Lake Michigan is there, so the very small Chicago will be there too. But what parts of Illinois look the most crowded on the map? The bottom part and the left-hand part, so the south and the west, not the top part where we live. Why do you think people were living there and not in the other parts of the state? By 1833, Chicago officially becomes a town. There were 350 people and 100 new buildings were started. People had big plans and big ideas. After Chicago became a town, it started to grow very fast. More people decided to live there. They built houses and shops. They also started to build the Illinois and Michigan Canal. Do you think the Chicago River was still important to the people of the new town? How can you tell? Was Fort Dearborn still there too? Can you see it? Look for the big flag. Now let's look at the Illinois and Michigan Canal. That picture on top shows canal boats. You can see they're big and they were able to carry a lot of different products and supplies. The Illinois and Michigan Canal connected Lake Michigan to the Illinois River, which then connected to the Mississippi River. That meant workers would have to dig a path for the canal from the blue dot on the map to the green dot. The canal took work. It was 96 miles long and took over 10 years to build. So why was a canal important? It connected Lake Michigan with the Mississippi River. That meant it let farmers ship crops faster and cheaper. They could save $50 in 3 days by using a canal instead of a horse and wagon. It also let farmers earn more money. Now they could sell to Chicago and beyond Chicago to other towns and cities. It let people travel too. Now people could go from Chicago to St. Louis in 3 days for only $9. That was pretty cool. Everyone wanted to come to Chicago now. The blue square on the map shows the size of the first town in 1833 compared to the size of Chicago in 1840 and in 1860. In 30 years, Chicago grew by over 100,000 people. Imagine that. Why do you think so many people wanted to come? Chicago grows. Who moves to Chicago? Well, people who work on the canal. It took a lot of workers to dig that big canal. New immigrants from Ireland and Germany came to Chicago. Farmers came to Chicago. Businesses who want to sell things to the farmers were part of Chicago now. And also businesses who want to sell what the farmers are growing. All of those different groups of people are part of Chicago. And that's why it grew from a city the size of the blue square to the big city that already had 112,000 people in it. But it wasn't done yet. What else helped Chicago grow? Although the canal helped Chicago grow in the beginning, there were many other reasons that Chicago kept growing so fast, and a lot of them are in the pictures right here. First of all, trains. The canal helped Chicago grow in the early years, but after the canal, trains were very important too. Train tracks could reach places that the canal could not. This meant farmers all over Illinois had a chance to sell their crops to the people living in Chicago. Also, plows. The plow. John Deere invented the steel plow in 1837. This plow let the farmers in Illinois cut through the tough prairie grass roots much faster. This meant they could farm more land and grow more food to sell to the people in Chicago. Last of all, the picture on the bottom, factories. Factories. As more people moved to Chicago, they needed more things for their houses and shops. Businesses in Chicago built factories to make everything people needed and wanted to buy, like lamps, plows, clothes, and furniture. Many times, new immigrants worked in factories as their first job. Why do you think that happened? Do you think you needed to speak English to work in a factory? It was probably a pretty good job while you were learning what to do in your new country. Buffalo Grove was here in 1861 too. The town was very small then. Everybody lived on a farm and there was only one shop. This map shows Buffalo Grove. How many buildings did we have? Can you count them? It's a little hard to tell, but all those dark rectangles are buildings. Can you spot Tripp School? What about St. Mary's Church? Can you see where that was? Can you also see the Des Plaines River? By 1871, Chicago had grown very large. Things were going very well, but something big was about to happen. This picture shows Chicago in 1871, and by then there were 298,000 people. Look at it though. What kind of transportation do you see? Do you see a few different kinds of ships? What about the trains? Can you see the trains and all the train tracks? Can you even see bridges over the Chicago River that help people get from one house to the next house? And speaking of all those houses, do you think everyone in such a big city would grow their own food? They couldn't, could they? But people still kept coming, lots of people. Why do you think new immigrants would come here? In October of 1871, the Great Chicago Fire burned for 3 days. It destroyed over 17,000 buildings and 100,000 people were left without a home. This picture shows what Chicago looked like after the fire. So it went from the big picture you just saw to this. You can tell there's almost nothing left standing. So, Chicago, 1871, after the fire. What would Chicago need to rebuild the houses? What would they need to build the schools and factories? How would people get food and clothes? Who could help? Buffalo Grove farmers could help the people in Chicago. They could send milk, eggs, and vegetables to the city by horse and wagon and by train. They could send people to work to help build the city back up. Those were lots of different things Buffalo Grove could do to help Chicago. So the two places had to work together. Chicago rebuilt everything that burned down. They built even more houses and more factories. More and more people decided they wanted to come to Chicago. They came from all over the world. Now there were over 1 million people in the city. Even then, transportation is still important. How many different forms of transportation can you see in this picture? You can see the factories, but look for the transportation. Make sure you look behind the factory too, because you can just see the masts of the sailing ships poking up. In 1893, Chicago held a World's Fair to show how great the city was. People came from all over to visit the fair. Over 27 million people came in 6 months. These are some pictures and a map of the fair. The World's Fair was filled with wonderful things. Many people saw electric lights for the first time at the fair. The whole fair was lit up so that you could also visit it at night. People also saw the first Ferris wheel ever at the fair. It was invented specially for the fair. It was even bigger than the wheel that is on Navy Pier today. Imagine that. The fair was cool, but sometimes a big city isn't very nice to live in. It can be crowded, it can be dirty. Living in Chicago could be very crowded if your family did not have much money. Houses were close together, and many houses did not have electricity. There were no yards or parks to play in, so many children would play in the street. But if people worked in Chicago, it was hard to live somewhere else. How could they get to work? Buffalo Grove had plenty of space, but it did not have many places to work. If you did not work and live on a farm, there was no good way for you to get to a job somewhere else. Horses were good, but they took too much time. Cars changed Chicago. Cars changed everything. Now people could live in one town and work in a different town. That meant people did not have to live in the city or even near a train. The suburbs around Chicago started to grow. Do you think everyone could afford a car? What do you think a family would do if they could not buy a car? Could it be a real problem? This picture shows the first gas station in Buffalo Grove. It only had 2 gas pumps. That was enough for all of the cars and all of the families in the whole town. Now farmers could load their crops onto trucks to sell them wherever they wanted to. Now people could live in Buffalo Grove and work in a different town. Chicago was connected to Buffalo Grove, and every town was connected to everywhere else. What kind of changes do you think happened next? That's the end of this program. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, email us. Have a good day.